Alrighty, so match week number 31 is upon us, and this week, obviously, the big storyline, of course, is going to be the Leeds Cup final that we're going to see on Sunday. But that doesn't mean some of these regular season games are definitely not spicy. I mean, we have the Canadian Classique that's going to be happening this weekend. We have the battle between the top two team in the Eastern Conference, that is Cincinnati and the Philadelphia Union. We have LAFC versus San Diego that follows right after the Leeds Cup final. That should be a very good dessert kind of matchup after the entrees that is the Leeds Cup final, and of course the appetizer being the third place matchup between Orlando and the LA Galaxy. But most importantly, I'm actually going to be going to one of these games, and I'm actually going to be on the road as I'll be going to Austin to watch the Quakes take on Austin FC. And now, obviously, whenever I go away from home, it's going to be difficult for me to try to keep track of all of these games. I'm going to try my best in terms of doing so, but one thing for sure is that I'm going to definitely be relying heavily in terms of the highlights of some of these games. But let us begin with the first one, and let's begin by talking about the Canadian Classique between Toronto versus Montreal. Now, obviously, I know this year Canadian Classique, it's been kind of a meaningless kind of game when it comes to where each of these teams are in the standings. Both of these teams are not going to make it to the playoffs, but when it comes to the prestige and just the bragging rights, it is still there. I think there's no doubt that both of these teams, they do not like each other whatsoever, and the bragging rights is definitely there in terms of who is going to be the better team coming out of the eastern part of Canada. That is. Now that being said, this is also a matchup where Montreal would love to have themselves a little revenge after what happened in the first meeting where they got absolutely smacked in that Canadian Classic. I mean, it was a Canadian Classic massacre that we saw where Toronto put up a 6 spot against Montreal and won 6-1 in that one. But coming into this game, Toronto is 5-9-13, whereas Montreal is 5-8-15. This game is the first of 5 games that start at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. In fact, the Saturday game pretty much conclude relatively early, at least in the West Coast. That is, the last game actually concluded at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. But unfortunately, that also means that we got 10 games. That's going to be happening all at the same time. So yeah, again, even if I'm not on the road for this one, it's going to be almost impossible for me to try to keep track of that many game in such a short amount of period. But yeah, should be very interesting to see how this Canadian Classic goes in terms of the all-time meeting, 26-19 in favor of Toronto FC, and let's see whether or not a TFC will once again have another Canadian Classic to remember, because I'm pretty sure the last matchup, we've seen some great Canadian Classic before, whether it's like shootouts and also just one-sided affair like what we saw in the last game. We'll see whether or not if that's going to be the case again, especially if Montreal will want to have some revenge after they're losing 6-1. I mean, it can't get any worse than losing 6-1 to the TFC as they did earlier season, especially at home, nevertheless. Now, moving on, we got the New York Red Bulls versus the Columbus Crew. So the Red Bulls 11-6-11 and are just trying to get themselves into the playoff position. Though again, I think they're above the red line right now, if I'm not mistaken, but they don't control their own destiny because Chicago does have a game in hand. But they play against a Columbus team that all of a sudden, this is a Crew team that under Wilfred Nancy, they're starting to struggle a little bit. I mean, the last couple of games they have not played relatively well. They've now gone all the way down to 7 in the Eastern Conference. They still have a pretty respectable record of 12-9-6. That is, but in terms of the all-time leading, 16-9-14 in favor of the Columbus Crew. So yeah, we'll see how this game, of course, will turn out. Let's see if Columbus can get that big bounce back that they needed, because they definitely do not want to head into the playoffs relatively cold. I mean, there's one thing we know about the East this playoffs. It's going to be an absolute bloodbath again. There's just so many teams in the Eastern Conference, especially first all the way down to even the seventh position. You can definitely make a case that they can definitely be competing for MLS Cup out of the Eastern Conference. Now, moving on, we got NYCFC versus DC United. So NYCFC 13-5-8, and they're definitely in a more comfortable spot when it comes to where they are in the playoffs, considering they won a couple of games lately. They've been becoming very consistent, and again, this is another team that you could say that maybe could be a threat, especially with the way that they're getting hot at the right time. Now they face against DC United, who is anything but not hot in this season. In fact, they're pretty much done this season. This is the first team that is in the CU next season mode, with them officially being eliminated. Or they did a moving forward series talking about them earlier this week, but they have a 4-9-15 record, and now they're just trying to avoid winning the wooden spoon this year. All-time meaning 12-5-7 in favor of NYCFC. And on paper, this should be an easy win for NYCFC. But if there's one thing we'll say about NYCFC this season, especially when they're playing at home, well, they have done very well when it comes to facing against some of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. They've had their struggles against teams that they really should beat at home. I mean, there are some games where when you look at how they play at home against teams that are not doing very well. It's kind of almost a head scratcher of how in the world did they draw points against those kind of teams. So yeah, there's no doubt that I think Pascal Janssen will remind his team that they still got to respect DC United. I mean, I know DC is kind of in the see you next season mode, but this is also kind of the time when you have teams that already eliminated. Not only they want to play the spoiler role, but also a lot of these guys are fighting for jobs heading into next season. They're still going to give it their all, especially they may not be on this roster heading into next season as well. Now, moving on, we got New England versus Charlotte FC. So New England 8-7-12, whereas Charlotte, the hottest team right now in MLS, and are trying to reach the record that the Seattle Sounders set a couple of years ago of winning 9 in a row, and they have won 7 in a row coming into this one with a 15-2-11 record. In terms of the all-time meeting, 5-0-2 in favor of New England. So New England actually has got the better of Charlotte lately. So on one hand, when I did the video talk about the supporter shield race, I thought Charlotte should have no issue against New England. But when you look at the all-time meeting, maybe that might not be the case. Maybe I would say that this could be a game where it could be a trap game for Charlotte FC. Especially, I'm pretty sure they're looking forward to the Miami game next week, especially hosting at Bank of America Stadium. That should be a heck of a matchup between two very good team, and two teams are making a very late charge to the supporter shield race. So yeah, they got to realize that they got to take care of business in this game as well, and especially against a team that they haven't done relatively well lately. We'll see whether or not if that winning streak will extend to 8 heading in after this game is over. Now, moving on to one of the bigger games of this weekend, and a game that it's kind of unfortunate that this game is not being separated as a marquee matchup. In fact, this weekend we actually don't have Sunday night soccer, mainly because the Leeds Cup final, of course, is there. That's pretty much your edition of Sunday night soccer, at least this week that is. But if there is a Sunday night soccer game, this is definitely the one to do. So it's a battle between the top two team in the Eastern Conference, Cincinnati with a 16-4-8 record, whereas the Union is a 16-6-6 record. And in terms of the all-time meeting, 8-3-5 in favor of the Philadelphia Union. And I gotta say, this has started really becoming one of the better rivalries that we have seen. I mean, I know I don't want to kind of mention in terms of rivalries that maybe not have a lot of history, but when you look at the meeting between both of these teams, whenever both of these teams face off against each other, you're never disappointed. And I expect this is going to be the same case in this one. I think this could be a heck of a matchup between these two teams. That yeah, there could be a case that we might see a preview of the Eastern Conference Final as well, especially with both of these teams definitely in prime position in terms of trying to be the favorites coming out of the East to reach MLS Cup. Now, moving on to the 8:30 starts, and we have 5 games that happen at 8:30. This is by far probably the most 8:30 start that we have. A lot of teams from the Midwest and in the South in general are playing in this window, and we start off with Nashville SC versus Atlanta United. So a little Southeast derby that we see in this one. Nashville 15-5-8, whereas Atlanta has a 4-11-12 record. This used to be a pretty good rivalry, but it's kind of not been that case, and part of that is because Nashville has been so good. Atlanta hasn't really been that good lately. But in terms of the all-time meeting, 5-5-3 in favor of Nashville SC. And early days it was really Atlanta United that has really gotten the better of Nashville. Lately, it's really been more tilted toward the Nashville SC side of this rivalry. And yeah, there's no doubt that there could be a case that will continue in this one. Again, Atlanta, they're a team that I think they're also up for elimination this week as well. Which, if that is the case, then yeah, we'll see whether or not it maybe we might see the end of Ronnie Delia. I mean, I'm surprised that he hasn't been fired yet, especially of how bad the season is. I guess maybe they're being a little bit more patient and maybe give him one more year to do so. But with all the expectation that just have completely failed miserably for this Atlanta United team, I'm really surprised Ronnie Delia has not got the axe, especially from one of the team that is one of the most aggressive team when it comes to coaching, hiring, and firing in their young franchise history. Now, moving on, we got Minnesota versus the Portland Timbers. So Minnesota, they are they're a team that could potentially clinch playoff position. There's actually a couple of teams that could clinch playoff position, but Minnesota has probably the easiest path to clinch playoffs. All they need to do is get all 3 points in this game against the Portland Timbers, who have a 10-8-9 record. Minnesota 14-8-6 is the record. In terms of the all-time meeting, 10-3-5 in favor of Minnesota. Minnesota has definitely done much better in terms of the head-to-head meeting, especially in the regular season. They definitely have the Timbers number and are arguably they probably should be 11-2-5 right now in favor of Minnesota. Considered earlier this season they had that 1-0 lead in that one, had a big opportunity to get all 3 points, and then they threw it away because that's just kind of been the problem Minnesota's been having this season, which is closing out games. So yeah, we'll see whether that's gonna be an issue that hopefully won't be the case in this one. I mean, the last game against RSL, that was a very Minnesota United, very Loons like kind of road game with them relying on set pieces, and also in terms of not having a lot of possession. They're not going to have that luxury in this one because the Timbers is a team that likes to give up possession, especially when they're on the road. And again, this kind of goes back to what I said. Can this team still win games when they are giving possession? And especially, it's sad to see that Tani is no longer be on this team. He's officially sold to Villarreal as it was confirmed today. But it's a new era for certainly for some of these new signings that I heard some of these new signings haven't really got into this roster because they're still waiting for the work visa, but hopefully they'll eventually get into this team because definitely need some of these new signings to really hit the ground running and be potentially a pivotal uh, point for this team down the stretch and maybe on their way of making a deep playoff run heading into the season as well. Now, moving on, we got Sporting KC versus the Colorado Rapids. So Sporting KC, they're pretty close in that category of they're done. If not, they're pretty much done with the way that this losing run that they had. They pretty much have played themselves out of playoff contention. They have a 6-6-15 record, and also doesn't help the fact that they have their defense has just been non-existent ever since this losing streak. Their defense has just been wide open during this losing run. Now they face against a Colorado Rapids side that has a 10-6-12 record, but this is a Rapids side that, like I said, the frustrating thing about the Rapids this season is you just don't know what version of Colorado you'll get. You can either get a Colorado version that we saw a couple of games ago, getting that big win on the road against Minnesota and followed by a pretty good win against Atlanta United. And then you get the version we saw in the last game between the Rapids and the Galaxy, and a team that basically were facing against a second team against the Galaxy, and they still did not win that game. In fact, it wasn't even close. I mean, they laid an absolute egg in that game against the LA Galaxy. So this is kind of the frustrating thing about the Rapids, and I'm pretty sure if you're a Rapids fan, I mean, I can understand your frustration as well of the fact that you just don't know what kind of Colorado team will show up. I mean, you assume that this could be a good Colorado side, and if it is a good Colorado side that show up, then they should be able to mop Sporting KC out of the floor. But if this is going to be a bad Colorado side, like the one that showed up against the Galaxy, do not be surprised if the Rapids lose this game. And they themselves are not safe in terms of making the playoffs as well. They're in the midst of this playoff jumble that we see in the Western Conference as well. So if they go on a losing streak and if that inconsistent form started to turn into to a bad run of form, now all of a sudden Colorado could be in trouble as well because they don't really have too much leeway, not as much as you think that they do because of the inconsistent form that they've been in. Now, moving on, we got St. Louis versus the Houston Dynamo. So I talked about Sporting KC getting pretty much played themselves out of the playoff picture. You got to say that is getting close for the Houston Dynamo as well. They're getting close to really playing themselves out of the playoff picture. They have a 7-8-12 record, and they have a game where this is probably a must-win for the Houston Dynamo against the St. Louis side. That, well, yes, St. Louis have played a little bit better in the last couple of games, especially the attack has been pretty good. The defense, that's been a little bit questionable these last couple of games, but that was kind of expected. Their defense has not improved whatsoever. In fact, it's gotten worse under David Critchley. But they do have a 5-6-16 record. Houston 7-8-12 record. In terms of the all-time meeting, 3-2-2 in favor of St. Louis City. And like I said, for the Houston Nine, well, this is an absolute must-win. They if they do not win this game and they fall even further back from playoff contention, you could say that you might as well just stick a fork in them, and that this would ends up to be just a very disappointing season under Ben Olsen and a team that just really never got things going and never really got that summer reinforcement that you would have expect the summer reinforcement would come with this team, but it just hasn't really happened for this team, and that's why a lot of Dynamo fans feel like they've been betrayed by the front office in terms of the front office promising that they're going to invest big in the summer, and it turns out to be an absolute dud this summer transfer window. Now, moving on to the game that I'm going tomorrow, and again, this is definitely a definition of a playoff six pointer. So this is the second consecutive week the Quakes are in a playoff six pointer. I would argue this one is even more important, considering that these are two teams that, if the playoffs start today, both of these teams will be playing against each other in the playing round, and the game, of course, will be at PayPal Park. Now, obviously, both of these teams not only wants to make it to the playoffs, but they also want to avoid the playing round as well. The Quakes have a 9-8-11 record, whereas Austin have a 9-8-9 record. And in terms of all-time meeting, there has been a lot of draws in these all-time meeting. 2-7-1 is the all-time meeting. 2-8-1 if you include the U.S. Open Cup game, and that game, even though Austin won in the PK shootout, it is still going to count as a draw because it ended 2-2 after 120 minutes play. So yeah, I mean, a draw in this game, I don't know, would that favorite anyone? I mean, I guess maybe for the Quakes because they're on the road, but ideally, I would love to see them get 3 points. Consider, like I said, they got a really tough schedule in September. These are kind of the games that if they want to at least get themselves a little bit cushion, especially with some of the tough opponents that they have to still face, like the likes of LAFC and San Diego as well. These are kind of games that they need to win, especially against a team that could be they've been fighting for playoff position. In fact, this is a matchup that we're gonna see on decision day as well. So there could be a case where not only this is a playoff six pointer, but this might be a preview in terms of what we'll see in decision day, where it could come down to the final day between these two teams that are dueling out in terms of trying to make it in the playoffs. So yeah, I'm very excited to attend this one, but at the same time a little nervous as well. And I'm pretty sure Austin fans is kind of the same case as well. I mean, when it comes to a playoff six pointer like that, I know both of these teams desperately gonna win. But if you have to ask me who really needs this one more, it's got to be Austin. I mean, this team has just the last couple of games, things have just kind of gone south with this team again. Like that, especially the last game against Montreal. I mean, that was absolutely inexcusable for them to lose to one of the worst team in the league, even if that was on the road. And you also look at those draw points that they had against those Texas team, how much that now is gonna hurt them with the way that after that bad loss that they had against Montreal, and now facing against a team like the Quakes that they're a team that isn't a team that Austin has had some good history against. They cannot afford to draw more points at home. Like the key in terms of getting yourself into the playoffs, especially keep yourself in the playoff race and eventually getting yourself into the playoffs in this playoff race, you need to win your home games and hope to get resort on the road. You don't get those home points, you drop those home points and also lose on the road. That is definitely a recipe in terms of dropping out of the playoff picture, and it feels like that's kind of the case with Austin in the last golf game, really tumbling down the standings because of this bad run of form. Now, moving on into the Leeds Cup final game that we're going to talk about, which is the Seattle Sounders versus Inter Miami. So I'm not going to go too detailed in terms of this game, although I could definitely do so in this one because this is a matchup. I think a lot of people saw this coming. Seattle, this is a team that after that 7-0 beatdown that they had against Cruz Azul, when they pretty much lay down a marker with this team. This is a team that definitely believe that they can go deep, and especially this is the thing about Brian Schmitz's team. Brian Schmitz's team always have history of doing well in knockout competition, and it happened again in this one. Though besides the 7-0 game, I will say that it's kind of a little bit of an outlier in terms of the fact that the rest of the Leeds Cup, for them to get to the final hasn't been easy, and that include the next one where they won 2-1 against Santos Laguna. Wasn't a very convincing win in their opinion. But then they also got a 2-1 win against Tijuana, a game that they actually trailed for most part of the game, only to score a late goal to win that one. And then in the knockout round, they almost lost in the quarterfinal as well. I mean, Puebla pretty much gave Seattle hell when it comes to trying to pretty much playing park the bus mode, and not to mention the Sounders also had a red card in that game with Muswowski not being available in the semifinal and also for this final as well. He's pretty much suspended because of the reaction that he did did in that game, but they did prevail in the PK shootout, which is something that you usually do not say about the Seattle Sounders. And then, of course, probably the semifinal, that was maybe the most comfortable game that they had, where they were able to rush aside the Galaxy 2-0. Now, looking at Inter Miami, their road to the final hasn't really been easy either. I mean, they got a 2-1 win against Atlas in the first game, and then they got a PK shootout win against Necaxa in a very hard fought game as well. Then they got a 3-1 win against Pumas. I believe they were down in that game and they scored 3 unanswered goal. And then in the knockout round against the mighty Tigres, that is, they outlast them in that one. And then in the game against Orlando, where it was a game where they were down majority of that one as well, they scored 3 unanswered goal in the last 15 minutes to get themselves into that stage. So both of these teams, again, despite the fact that I said that I'm not surprised that both of these teams made it to the final, both of these teams have definitely faced some adversity throughout out the Leagues Cup to get to this stage, which is kind of expected when you usually see teams that made it to the final. There's never usually a case where teams just breeze their way into the final as well. It's very rare that of course has happened, but yeah, there's no doubt that this should be a very interesting final. Either way, I mean, the way I look at this final, I don't think this is a final that, if you're kind of just a casual fans, or you're just kind of a MLS sicko like myself, I don't know. This is a final that you really were hoping for, because on one hand, if Inter Miami wins, you're gonna have to deal with the insufferability of the fair weather fans that it is in that fan base. But if Seattle wins, then yeah, it will once again open that Pandora box of the insufferable Seattle fans that's been shown. So yeah, there's not really a win-win situation. But again, I'm pretty sure the general public, when it comes to who they really want to win, it's got to be Seattle. I mean, I know for a fact that pretty much everybody hates Inter Miami this season. If I had to do a tier list in terms of the most hated team, and even one for in my opinion, Miami would literally be at the very top, because of how things have been for them. So yeah, it's pretty simple. The fact that everybody will be rooting for the Sounders, hope that they knock off the evil empire known as Inter Miami, at least in the last 2 years. But should be a very exciting final, that is. I also expect it should be a packed crowd in this one. It could be close to the capacity crowd that we saw in the CONCACAF Champions League final a couple of years ago against Pumas, where there was like 60,000, 8,000 plus that show on this one. The same could happen in this one as well. And then last but not least, believe it or not, we do have one more game to talk about besides the Leeds Cup final. You thought the Leeds Cup final was pretty much the last game to finish off of what is going to be a very exciting weekend. But no, we still have one more game, and that of course is LAFC versus San Diego. So as I mentioned, the appetizer in terms of the Sunday action, the first game is Orlando and the LA Galaxy. Get that game, I didn't put it on the preview because it is a third place match, but it is still important in terms of who, of course, will get themselves a CONCACAF Champions Cup spot, which is a very valuable spot. And then, of course, we got the entree that is Seattle and Miami in a cup final in the Leeds Cup. But for the dessert, we get LAFC and San Diego, and this equally could be an exciting matchup as well, because LAFC 11, 8, and 6, they're climbing up the standings in MLS and trying to go as high as they can with all those games in hand. They face against a team that is currently second in the support ratio standing, that is San Diego FC, with a 16-5-7 record. This game starts at 10:45 p.m. Eastern, 7:45 p.m. Pacific, but I believe this game is going to be on FS1, so yeah, the real start time is probably going to be 10:55 p.m. Eastern, 7:55 p.m. Pacific. I don't know why exactly they decided to schedule this game this late. I mean, I think the reason is because they can't really schedule the game in between the third place match and the cup final that is. But I feel like for a marquee game like this, they probably should have just maybe scheduled this on Saturday as a standalone game, because you look at the Saturday action. I mean, the last game is gonna finish at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. They could have easily just put it there as a lone window, and that would be just as good of a marquee match as it is. But instead, they decided to put it on Sunday night. All-time meaning in terms of these two SoCal rivalry. I mean, do you consider this to be a rivalry? I mean, San Diego fans, let me know in the comments below, who do you actually hate more? I mean, I'm pretty sure they'll say that they hate both LA team, but who they really hate more? Do they hate the Galaxy more, or LAFC when it comes to this little SoCal rivalry. I mean, again, I think San Diego fans are probably gonna say both, because if you talk to any San Diegans, they will say that they want nothing to do with any team coming from LA. But yeah, the all-time meeting, the first ever meeting, what a meeting that turns out to be. It was a 3-2 win that San Diego has. San Diego had a 3-0 lead in that one, almost blew that lead as well, with LAFC surging back, but ultimately San Diego was able to hold on to get the 3-2 win. So yeah, we'll see how this game is going to look like, and especially for LAFC, they want revenge against San Diego. And for San Diego, in this game, they need to score more than just the 1 or 2 goals. The problem with San Diego lately is the fact that, well, yes, they are still winning games and still getting points. The problem with San Diego lately is that their attack has been very fruitless in these last couple of games. They definitely have not played as well as we see them in the beginning of the season. And this is also where some people are saying, well, it seems like San Diego is suffering the same problem that St. Louis is starting to have in their expansion season, where as incredible as the season it goes, it looks like they're starting to run out of gas a little bit. And don't be surprised, maybe they'll get knocked out in the first round as well, just like St. Louis has. I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't know if San Diego is going to get knocked out in the first round, but one thing I will say is that, yeah, they got to pick things up. I mean, Anders Schreier is basically carrying this team on his back, and he's gonna have to continue to do so for the rest of the season and even to the playoffs. Because again, I think when you look at the San Diego team, especially on the attack, they started to become too heavily reliant on Anders Schreier. I mean, if you can just shut down Anders Schreier, which is not an easy thing to do, you basically just shut down the San Diego attack, because they don't really have anybody else. Maybe Chucky Lozano, but Chucky Lozano has been very inconsistent this season as well. But yeah, for the most part, if you can shut down Anders Schreier, you have a big opportunity to get a win against San Diego FC. But there you have it. That is pretty much it when it comes to looking at the games that's going to be happening this weekend. Like I said, I'm going to try my best in terms of watching these games. I'll definitely watch the third place matchup in the Leagues Cup final. I'll be actually on the plane when the third place match is going to happen, and the same goes as the cup final. So fingers crossed the internet on the plane is going to be good. The Wi-Fi is going to be good. Probably not, but I'll do what I can do in terms of watching both of those final. I mean, by the time when I get back here in the Bay Area, I think this game between Seattle and Miami is still going to be happening. Get back here in the Bay Area around 6 o'clock tomorrow. That is, if there is no flight delay that can cause problem. And did I say tomorrow? I meant Sunday. That is when I come back. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure to like, smash the subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below what do you think of these games. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.